Thank you very much.
All right, so are there questions in the room? All right, up here, who's my mic person? Up here to American Richard, as he's known now.
American Richard, as opposed to Canadian.
Oh, where's Canadian Richard? Oh. Tim, thank you. I feel selfish because I was in your workshop, so I could have asked this question then. But I think it's important. Being somebody
My
who...
answer might be just perhaps, mightn't it, as well? Maybe. So being someone who's been working on developing frameworks and being knowledgeable of these frameworks that we're working in, and now knowing, all of us improving our understanding of pain and perception, and these embedded and embodied models, we find ourselves now embedded in the lives of our patients. What frameworks have you ever explored, or could you explore for, what our new role is, and how does that affect what we do, who we think we are, or how we think in the clinic? I feel like we have more knowledge now, we have more responsibility, but it's like, what do we do? Thank you, Richard. Can I ask whether I have got this right? So, is there a clinical model that would accurately be able to be used to incorporate what we're learning about here? Is that the question? You've got no way of qualifying it.
A fun model that you use to put yourself in society.
So what Richard said was a fun model to put yourself as a clinician into society. Beyond the models that we've talked about, and there are a number of others I guess we could have gone down. So inactivity is one of them, predictive processing we explored as well. There isn't one in particular that I would say I've definitively used and found really useful. Beyond a reflective practice, so reflecting, thinking, going through a metacognitive process. I was one of these geeks, I guess, who had a lot of travel time, so I did an awful lot of reading, but I also audited every one of my patients for a couple of years to see whether or not I was doing what I thought I was doing, and whether they went where I thought they would go as well, so I kept things like a prognosis. So I did a lot of critical thinking in my own practice. Yeah. I don't think that answers your question, but thank you. Yeah. Answered my own question. I would love someone to hold up a rubber hand.
Could you say, two questions, could you say a bit more about what the blink reflex is? You said it's stronger when the hand's next to the face, especially in empathy. And then my second question, I'll go ahead and mix that in. When 2-point discrimination changes, does pain change?
Okay, I think it's an illegal maneuver, isn't it, having two questions? But thank you for that. I'll let it slide. Yeah, the blink reflex is just the reflexive action of the ocular muscles. So I'm guessing that it would be measured through maybe EMG activity. I'll have to look at the paper and to remember exactly. 2-point discrimination, whether or not it's linked to pain, I haven't suggested that. What I've suggested with what we've seen here is that a disruption in body perception and body awareness seems to be linked at the same time to a disruption in 2-point discrimination for some. And also that might link with a disruption in their voluntary movements as well. I wonder whether you're putting knowledge, back when 2-point discrimination seemed to be correlated with an improvement in pain state and an improvement in the activation of the primary somatosensory cortex. So there was a couple of people studying that area. I'm not really that confident in the results that came out from those studies. And there's a couple of different problems there. The region of interest and the measure, needed to be more than just the primary somatosensory cortex, for instance. But we do see reports that as someone's pain improves, they have an improvement in measures like 2-point discrimination. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions in the room or online? Nothing online?
They were their own hot tub, weren't they, last night?
This question is from Sherry Piancent. I'm working with CRPS patients. How do you balance their need to control their environment and the need for graded exposure?
How do you balance the need to, I missed that, the need to do what?
So how do you balance their need to control their environment and the need for graded exposure to encourage adaptation? We need to validate their experience yet push them as well to have them adapt.
Well, that's a really long one, isn't it? I mean, look, for some people don't need to control their environments, but it may be safer for them or helpful for them in a temporary way to create some form of constraints there. And we saw a picture of Mary just beforehand. One of the things we had to do with Mary was to accept that she needed to use a wheelchair to get around. I don't remember the last bit, but it made me start thinking about affordances and agency. And it's an interesting thing about pain that it's almost as though pain has agency over someone with persistent and severe pain states. So their possibilities in their life or the affordance that they have within their environment can be hugely limited. But as you offer something back to them, what I would say is that they grow in areas that you can't predict that they're growing. So their possibilities, what they're able to do, where they're able to do it, it can change in very different rates. But for me, it's about giving someone back health and well-being to them in many areas of their life. Again, I've no idea whether that was the question or not.
We have another online question from Brian Rutledge. Do you think it's possible to improve disruption of body image or self-perception by the intentional training of interoceptive skills, similar to the work of Cynthia Price?
Great question. The important thing is that I believe it's dynamic, so disruption would suggest that perhaps on the continuum it's not able to move fluidly or flexibly on the continuum. So, for instance, our example of being embodied and disembodied, perhaps that they are struggling to be dynamically disembodied at a stage. So, skills like building interoceptive awareness is or could be really helpful for some people, but there will be populations, so chronic fatigue, for instance, tends to be characterized by people who are already interoceptively very aware, so very interested in what's going on within their body. So I would say, like Karen was mentioning yesterday, it would be about treating the individual and understanding whether there is a relative phenotype for the states that we see.
Questions in the room or online?
I got scared away.
No?
Too early.
It was just that good of a presentation.
Early, yeah.
No questions. We get it. Okay, awesome. Well, then we'll start break a little bit early. We'll be back at 11:15.